Welcome to the Morning Slice.
Hey friends, welcome back to the Morning Slice. This is your host, Brianna McInerny speaking. And today we're talking about a conversation that's pretty difficult for most people, which is feeling suicidal. And I just want to say right up front that if it gets triggering for anybody, that you should stop listening and potentially call a hotline. There are a lot of those that exist, and I will put a number to the national hotline in the show notes. You're welcome to email me as well, info@briannamcnerny.com, or slide into my DMs anywhere. If there's anything I can do to help you work through this conversation, I'm here for you. But this topic has been tumbling around in my head for a while. I have my own long history with feeling suicidal and loss of a loved one to suicide, which we'll come back to in just a minute. But recently, while I was working for my previous employer who provides grief support in my area, I attended a Survivors of Suicide Loss Day event that gave me the pleasure of connecting with other people who have lost loved ones to suicide and discussing all the things that come along with that type of loss. And then the thought track got louder after Aaron Bushnell self-immolated in Washington, D.C. to bring attention to what's happening in Gaza. And just witnessing the conversation that unfolded around all of that, I noticed how some people brought a lot of mental health conversations into play, and I just have so many thoughts about this. And part of that is because of the history that I have with feeling suicidal and losing a loved one to suicide. So my journey with feeling suicidal actually started when I was little, and I was reviewing some of my old blogs. I have a few that I'll link in the show notes that I wrote back in 2018, I believe, where I talked about my loss and how that was really the beginning of my journey with feeling suicidal. But as I reflect, that's not actually true, I don't think, because I've found journal entries from when I was much younger, before I'd ever met Brad, that kind of had these questions around like feeling sad and feeling like I didn't necessarily belong in the world or belong anywhere. So I think that this like angstiness inside of me and this questioning about my place in the world happened a lot sooner and was just intensified when I lost my first love to suicide. So that started a whole years-long, struggle for me losing him. I struggled for a really long time until eventually I connected with a group in Boston called Samaritans, who provides a suicide hotline, a suicide prevention hotline. And I took calls on that hotline. I got a lot of training around supporting people through feeling suicidal. And that was incredibly healing for me. It really helped me turn a page to feel a little bit more empowered, a little bit more processed around my loss, and gave me some tools to not only help myself, but to help others, which was huge for me. And then I have a lot of experience after that working with suicidal clients as a mental health case manager. I worked in that line of work for about 5 or 6 years after college, and sat with people who were really intensely suicidal. Like, I would drive people to the hospital if need be, and just, help them through that, help them connect with support. And of course, my own experience with feeling this way has evolved throughout all of this. I am at a period in my life, hopefully what's the tail end of a period of my life, of feeling more intensely suicidal than I can ever remember feeling. There were a couple of years before I had my son that I had been feeling really challenged in life and business and questioning a lot of my worth and my belonging in the world, which got a little bit better while I was pregnant. And then postpartum, hormones just really had an impact on me. And I experienced a lot of postpartum depression symptoms, and then ultimately ended my relationship with my son's father, and that sparked a whole chain of life events like moving and, just questioning my worth all over again. And recently, when I lost my full-time job, I have definitely noticed a resurgence of feelings like that. And luckily, at this point in my life, I know pretty well how to approach myself when I start feeling this way. I know how to recognize it. I know how to think about it and connect with support. But it's ever evolving. I don't expect that I will ever be fully in the clear, because there's something about experiencing these feelings and experiencing losses to suicide that it's like a door that has been opened that is really hard to close. So instead of trying to eradicate this from myself, I've found a lot more benefit in learning how to work with it. And I would like to share some of that process with you today. So buckle up. Here we go. Have you ever felt like you just weren't made for this world? I am totally with you. Some of the most common reactions to conversations about feeling suicidal that I've heard are that people are afraid to explicitly talk about it or ask someone if they're feeling suicidal. We typically want to avoid that conversation. I mean, people, generally speaking, like to keep it light and positive, right? But if you're here, I'm guessing that you're with me and you like to go deep. So we are definitely not keeping it shallow here today. One of the other common things that I hear in the conversation about suicide is that it's often attributed to suicidal feelings being strictly a mental health issue. So if somebody feels that way, then the solution is to find things to improve their mental health. This link between mental health and suicide is pretty widely accepted as fact. And maybe people with mental health challenges are indeed more at risk. But to me, it seems like the story is more complicated than that. For instance, more than 50% of people who die by suicide don't have a known or diagnosed mental health condition. It is pretty close to 50%. And I'll link in the show notes to the study that I'm referencing. But it's not that clean cut. We're going to keep talking about this. The challenge, though, and I'm sure that some of you will be a little bit miffed maybe by me saying that suicide shouldn't necessarily just be linked as a mental health issue, because a lot of survivors of suicide loss cling to mental health as a scapegoat for their loved ones passing. I can understand that. It becomes the reason, the excuse, kind of like if my loved one was in their right mind, they never would have done this. So it becomes the mental illness's fault and not their fault or their loved one's fault. It's a much easier pill to swallow for most people. The problem that I have with this, though, is that it feeds into the idea that something is wrong with us if we feel an impulse to remove ourselves from the world, which creates shame around the feeling, which is really the last thing that we need to be feeling, because it starts a cycle of feeling worse and feeling more suicidal, feeling like we even more so don't belong in this world. It feeds into the idea that something is wrong with us. The other issue I take with linking suicidal thoughts and suicide attempts and completed suicides as a mental health issue is that it does shirk our own individual responsibility for creating a world that is safe for a person who feels things very deeply, for people who are experiencing hardships, for people who need a little bit of extra love and support or resources to get by. When we simplify this as being a mental health issue, it feels like there's nothing that we personally can do or could have done about that, which I know this is a harder pill to swallow, but what if there were things that we could do to make this world a safer place for everyone? What if the impulse to remove yourself from the world was regarded as an understandable impulse in response to your surroundings? In my experiences, expressing understanding around this without trying to talk someone out of their feelings is hugely impactful in supporting people through suicidal moments. So again, what if feeling suicidal was a completely understandable emotional response to someone's circumstances and their observations about the world? What could shift in our conversations about suicide if we expressed a little bit more understanding, a little less fear, a little less blame? Because the truth is that specific circumstances like financial hardship, job loss, relationship troubles, these can significantly contribute to someone's suicidality. We need to become more flexible in the ways that we understand and speak about these issues. And if you feel like I'm blowing your mind or your world apart a little bit when I'm trying to take away the coping skill of identifying suicide as a mental health issue, I am fully looking at you right now. We need to be flexible in the ways that we learn to cope with our losses and our feelings, because if you have had feelings like this or you've lost someone to suicide, these don't just go away. They can continue on for our whole lives. And the truth of the matter is that you will grow and change, and you will need different things over time. We need to be flexible in our journeys and willing to grow into new coping skills when one that used to be for us isn't working for us anymore, especially when we're attaching some of our healing process or reasons to stay alive to other people. As we grow and change, it is to be expected that we are going to need different things at different times. So I would never want to find you struggling in a moment where the only thing or the only person who has been able to pull you out in the past is for some reason not working or not available. We have to get a little bit deeper in the way that we approach this, so that we can be flexible and we can stay alive. So I really want you today to get comfortable asking yourself and others the hard questions. Understand your earliest possible warning signs so that you can start kicking up support as early as possible. Take some of the fear away. Would it take some of the fear away for you if you thought about your suicidal intent or suicidal ideation as understandable? Like, Look at the world around us. I mean, people with big hearts are bound to have a hard time in the state of the world today. There is so much pain that we are able to tap into on a day-to-day basis. It is so completely understandable that that would be hard to bear. But what if we looked at pain as another important layer to our life experience? You know, there's so much depth and expansion that we can get from witnessing our painful moments and allowing them to tell us what's important to us. Tell us what we want to create in the world. Tell us how we want to show up for other people. You know, use it to guide you and drive you, but never give in to it, right? I also want to say that it's important to get out of ahead of this and catch these thoughts as soon as possible, because a lot of attempts happen quickly. It happens within 5 minutes of having the idea. So ideally, we need to recognize the feelings before that idea even crosses our mind. So what's the first thing you notice when suicidal thoughts are starting to creep in? For me, it's a feeling of being an inconvenience or a burden to others. That seems to be the earliest warning sign I can pinpoint at this point of my life. If I don't address those feelings of being burdensome or being an inconvenience to others, then passive suicidal thoughts are not far behind, and then they can escalate from there. So what is the first thing that you notice, and what makes you feel better when you notice that that's happening? We have to find practices that work for us. So for me, that's largely within the framework of my Conscious Wholeness course, which is basically a guide for using your mind, body, and energy more intentionally. Instead of letting those things run wild in the patterns that you're used to, being able to kind of train them towards what you actually want. So there are lots more specific practices, both in the context of conscious wholeness and just, you know, self-love and personal development in general, like journaling or tapping or doing somatic work or energy work. These can all be part of that process, but you have to find what works for you. And again, you need to be flexible in which tool you're using when. And if one doesn't feel good or isn't helping, then be willing to try something else. And one more thing is that I really don't recommend you face this all by yourself. For me, it makes a huge difference to tell other people how I'm feeling. This honesty can help dispel some of that energy that gets pent up behind the feelings. And if I'm lucky and sitting with a person who gets it or is supportive, then they can help me process through things and feel a little bit better. But worst case scenario, they don't get it, then at least I have, again, dispelled some of that pent up energy and taken some of the charge away from the internal chaos that goes along with feeling suicidal. So connect with a good support system, learn who you can trust, and keep going until you find those people. Also, do the practical things. Lock up lethal means. That makes a difference. Like I said, a lot of times attempts happen fast. So if there is that moment where you need to get a gun out of a gun closet, a locked box, or you need to, do something to liberate the means, then that can offer you the moment of reflection that you need to kind of snap out of it and realize that we need you here. Asking people you love the hard questions about how they're really doing if you suspect that they are suicidal is important, and asking yourself the hard questions as well. Getting used to having these types of conversations makes it so much less likely that it's going to take any one of us out. We need to feel free to talk to each other about these things. So I also want you to consider coming back full circle to that idea about, is suicidality, suicidal thoughts, are they an indication of mental illness? Maybe. But what if feeling suicidal were an understandable response to a big-hearted person living in a harsh world? What is the most meaningful action that you can take today to make the world a softer place for yourself and others? I want you to think about the person you love the most, the person with the very biggest heart that you know of. Like, what would you want the world to look like for them? And what if you took ownership to creating that world? Like, why do we keep forcing people into these harsh, violent systems that aren't really working for anybody except a select few who implemented them? How can you actively contribute to the world that you want to create? Maybe we weren't made for this world because we were made to create a new one. This world needs the love only you can offer. So please stay with us and keep giving it. All right, you guys. So there you have it. This has been an incredibly challenging podcast to get out of me. I've wanted to do this for a while, and I've known that it's the next one to record for at least a couple weeks. And, I'm so grateful to finally have my butt in the seat finishing it up for you. I would love to hear what this sparked for you. Please try to be gentle with me as if you want to argue any of the points. I'm totally open to discussing anything that you don't agree with or anything that was challenging for you. These are my thoughts and opinions, and they don't need to be yours. We do not need to agree. But as I said, this has been difficult for me to get out. This is an issue I deal with personally. So please try to be gentle with me. I will do the same for you. I mentioned at the beginning that I would drop a hotline for you in the show notes, so I am going to do that. And please, 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 if you do feel like that would be beneficial for you, call them. It can be really challenging because sometimes the hotlines do get backed up. Sometimes it's a busy time and there aren't enough people to take the calls. So, have multiple lines of attack, be flexible, like I've encouraged you, and just keep reaching out for the support you need until you find it. I'm also going to link a suicide awareness blog series that I wrote a few years back. I think I also mentioned that at the beginning. In there are some studies linked that will take care of any of the stats that I mentioned. And again, if you have any questions that you want to discuss further, then please feel free to reach out. I would be more than happy to connect with you. On that note, I will drop a few different things in the show notes about how to connect with me. So as I've mentioned, you can email me anytime at info@briannamcnerny.com. I would be happy to connect with you. You are welcome to schedule like a 30-minute coffee talk with me. Just no pressure. Let's chat and catch up. I would love to hear how you're doing. I would love to talk about how this landed for you. It would genuinely be a pleasure to connect with you. I will also drop a link for my epiphany sessions, which are basically like a 2-hour working consultation. These are really powerful sessions. Most people who have done epiphany sessions with me actually get everything that they need from this 1 2-hour session. They do not actually need to continue on working with me, because typically what happens is that we get really clear on what it is you want. We get very clear on what it is that's stopping you, or what the experience is that you're having that makes it feel difficult to get what you want. And then we dive into that and we create some shifts for you right away and identify what you can do even just a little bit differently moving forward. Another thing about these sessions is that most of the time I hear myself saying, like, this isn't actually anything that you need to do differently. It's about how you are thinking about it and using your intention behind it that makes all the difference. And these are so powerful for people. So I would love to do that with you. It's really the only way to work with me or get started with me right now. I mentioned conscious wholeness in this episode, and conscious wholeness is going to come back. This is a course that's all about making more intentional decisions. It's about stepping out of the patterns that you're used to and using your mind, body, and energy more intentionally to create the life that you want, instead of recreating all the things that you don't want but you seem to keep doing over and over again anyway. There's really not a way to get in there right now. If you are feeling so called after listening to this that you absolutely must get into conscious wholeness as it is, and you're willing to stick with me through the currently unedited videos, and you just want that information and the resources in there, then let me know. Maybe there's a way we can get you in, but I would recommend starting with my free 5 days of wholeness experience. Those are 5 short videos that give you a basic overview of what's in the course, and it'll put you on the wait list so that you'll be the first one to know about it when I do re-release conscious wholeness, because that is happening, friends. So thank you so much for listening. I really value your time and attention more than you know, and I look forward to seeing you again next time on The Morning Slice.